Hey folks, it's Swank Ivy with another Letters to an Asexual. Well, let's check and see what number this the heck is. Letters number 68. Yeah, I was gonna make a video outside and I was sitting on my porch, and of course as soon as I opened the video camera, the jackass across the street started up his lawnmower. And I waited for him to finish, and I thought he was going to be about done when he started emptying the container into his trash can. But then he drove it into the backyard and started mowing the backyard and doing the edging, and I'm like, you know what? This is just not gonna work. So you don't get an outdoor video this time, maybe next time, because I want to make this tonight. As a compromise, the small amount of remaining daylight is coming in through the window, but I am inside. And at least that has the side effect of me not getting eaten by mosquitoes. So let's get into the letter. This was a fella that felt the need to weigh in with his opinion on a Huffington Post article that was about asexuality, and I was one of the people that was featured in the article. There were a whole bunch of asexual people whose opinions were solicited for, I believe this was on a six-part series of connected articles about asexuality and different aspects of it, and I was featured in 2 of them. So during that time I was also paying a lot of attention to the comments, and where I felt it was useful and appropriate, I responded to some of them. For the most part, I stayed out of the comments because it's just exhausting on something that is that far-reaching as a mainstream media article. Anyway, so this person commented on one of the Huffington Post articles. I don't remember what the topic of it was, but his opinion was this. He says, "I don't find that this topic is being dealt with in a logical manner, even by the most educated and reasonable among us. We don't ridicule people with disabilities. I'm not going to make someone with Down syndrome feel bad for their affliction, but I'm also not going to act like it's just a natural state of human development. People may be asexual due to birth defects or mutation in some part of the brain. Those people deserve our sympathy. If they're happy, all is well. Who cares? It has no impact on anyone. They may also be asexual based on atypical life experience, and specifically, if it is psychologically based, we should be willing to acknowledge that in some cases pathology is involved. That doesn't mean we treat asexual people like they're diseased. There's no reason not to be friendly about it, but we shouldn't be romanticizing this as some kind of healthy lifestyle choice either. I get that some don't fit the mold. If you don't want sex, whatever. This conversation has nothing to do with being mean to people, but I bristle at the notion that this is some kind of healthy sexual orientation, like being gay or straight. Of course, I'm willing to discover that I don't get it. Smiley face." I was the first to respond to this person, but there were others, and I will share those with you as well. My first response was this: well, or you could watch the video and try to understand why everything you suggested as a reason we actually have a medical condition and deserve pity is actually a misconception. Winky face. There's also a decade's worth of academic, medical, and sociological research on us if you'd like to look into it, including a textbook entitled Understanding Asexuality by Dr. Anthony Bogart. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the Bible of Psychology, acknowledges asexuality as a legitimate orientation, by the way. Mainstream science disagrees with you. And then another person came into the comments, and he says this: "Considering I am a gay man, I'm happy that you think my sexual orientation is healthy. However, I'm confused. If you think asexuality is not healthy because it doesn't make babies, then why do you think I, as a gay man, am healthy? Not that I'm asking you to call me unhealthy, of course. I view asexuality as a part of natural human variance, along with hypersexuality, which Huffington Post is far more timid about discussing. I would also like to interject that asexuality isn't a lifestyle choice. in the context of sexuality, when we talk about LGBT people or about asexual people, such as this conversation, by definition of the terms we're referring to a person's biological instincts. It's like the difference between MSM, men who have sex with men, and gay men, men who are driven to form relationships, sexual or romantic, with other men. One is defined by behavior, the other by motivation. Chastity, for example, is a behavior which mimics asexuality, a motivation. However, just as people with strong sex drives can be abstinent, asexual people can be promiscuous if they feel the need to prove something. I'm not going to respond to the parts of that comment that I have quibbles about or disagree with. It's, not what I want to go into with this, but I don't necessarily agree with everything that person said, but I appreciate the angle that they came from. So, and then another person came in and said this: I'm afraid I don't understand why you would bristle at anything. I know people who have never played golf, not regular golf, not chip and putt, not miniature golf. They don't care to watch people play golf, they don't wish to read about golf, and they don't have much to say about the subject, so they don't get into conversations with it. Now, even I, a person who has enjoyed golf, doesn't think there's anything unhealthy about someone not being into golf. So what's the difference between that and those of us who have a low libido and little to no interest in sex? And then another commenter says this: it is healthy. It just doesn't fall into the norm majority, which for most people, gay or straight, is sexual activity. It only seems abnormal to those who can't comprehend the idea of being utterly uninterested in sex, both as action and as concept, entirely, basically projecting their own beliefs onto someone else. Again, I'm not going to debate the basically supportive comments. And then one more person before the original commenter comes back says, what's unhealthy about it? Who gets to decide what orientations are healthy? You just said not to treat them like they're diseased. Asexuals aren't hurting anybody. This video is only asking for understanding and maybe a little compassion for a grossly misinterpreted orientation. If you're straight/gay, surely you can understand the idea of finding a certain part of the population unattractive. Even if you're bisexual or pansexual, surely you look at some people and feel no sexual interest. Just imagine all people have that reaction for you. Are you horrified every time you aren't aroused by somebody? You probably don't even think about it. I think asexuals just want everybody to stop treating them like they need to be fixed for something that they don't even think about in day-to-day life. Like any other LGBTQ, I think asexuals simply want to be open about who they are, understood, and accepted. Does that really take so much effort? So the original commenter returns and says, I respect the effort here. I know the intent is to prevent people from being misunderstood and ridiculed. I also think you mischaracterized what I said and that your position is clouded by a confirmation bias. You want to believe something and have found evidence that supports it. Oh, and yeah, I watched the video and I disagreed with some of it. I'm primarily disagreeing with what I view as overgeneralization. Some people are asexual due to a defect or trauma. Some make a choice. Yeah, it's a legitimate orientation because human consciousness has evolved to the point that we accept unusual character, but sex drive is the fundamental drive in life and core to biology. It is, by the definition of life itself, not normative to be asexual. Now, things that aren't normal aren't bad or worthy of ridicule, but trying to normalize something like asexuality without being honest about how far away from normal it really is seems like a fool's errand. So here's what I'm saying. This video would have seemed a lot more honest if you had been a bit more candid and simply said, yeah, this isn't normal. This is an unusual way for people to be. And there are many complex reasons, physical and emotional, that would lead to this behavior. And we should respect people nonetheless. Don't you love how he tells me how my videos should address what he thinks are the flaws in them? And for the most part, I already have. My response to him was direct, and I said, some people who are asexual have defects as well, sure, but asexuality is a description, not a disease or a disorder in and of itself. People identify as asexual if their subjective experience of themselves is to not feel sexual attraction. That's it. It's the what, not the why. And as mentioned, it isn't just asexual people who have accepted asexuality's existence. I mentioned some resources if you'd like to take a look at people's research who don't have a dog in the race. But the problem with "but sex equals natural" is that it suggests it's the only way to be natural. While actually homosexuality and other non-heterosexual orientations occur naturally all the time, despite that they don't usually result in reproduction. Another problem in suggesting this isn't one way to be normal is that it denies the experience of plenty of people who aren't damaged in any way but don't feel sexual attraction. If you've decided that normal is very narrow and that outside normal equals sick/disordered, fine, but what's considered normal changes with education and research. Homosexuality used to be a disorder in the DSM, now it's not. Asexual people are approximately 1% of the population. It's not the most popular way to be, obviously, but it's not therefore a disorder simply because it's uncommon. It's not misleading or specious or dangerous to suggest it's one possible natural way to be, and I didn't mask its rarity in my video. He responds to me. To me, all that is implied. Nobody I know thinks gay people are damaged. I realize you are trying to educate all sorts of people here. I'm not here to argue the meaning of normal. I'm thinking about my motivation here, and I've realized that the issue for me is not whether some people are born this way. The issue is that this behavior can also represent mental pathology, and that your position could very possibly be enabling an unhealthy behavior. And that requires that you acknowledge that there's a perfectly good reason why many people would look at that behavior as unhealthy, because for some people it is. And I replied one more time and I said, feel free to look at my body of work if you'd like a comprehensive understanding. I do acknowledge that some people who don't want to have sex have a disorder. Those disorders, as represented in the DSM-5, are hypoactive sexual desire disorder and sexual arousal/interest disorder, both of which have a specific exception for asexuality, saying a person can't be diagnosed with these if they're asexual. You're misrepresenting my message if you believe I'm covering up the existence of sexual dysfunctions by advocating for asexuality's lack of pathology as an orientation. So, obviously, some of the people that I've argued with are way worse than this. They're very violent about it. They have violent-sounding responses to asexuality. They want us to be hurt. They want us to be fixed. They want us to shut up. And this person was very careful to keep talking about how, well, we shouldn't be mean about it, but we've got to acknowledge that there's something wrong with these people. At the same time that it's not a disease or it's not normal. I don't know, it just seemed like he contradicted himself a lot. But he seemed mostly concerned that being willing to acknowledge asexuality as a legitimate orientation was going to lead directly to people who have a problem identifying that way to mask the problem. How many people who are not straight have identified as straight to avoid a problem that they have, either if it's actually being another orientation and being scared of acknowledging that because of either self-rejection or rejection of other people around them in their family or their partners or whatever. You know, it is so much more common, just because of the numbers, to pretend to be straight than it is to misdiagnose yourself as another sexual orientation. But people are only really concerned about the people who are misdiagnosing themselves as a non-straight orientation and ending up being mistaken or ending up realizing that there's more to the journey before they figure out what a proper label is for them. It really shows what their priorities are when they're only worried about those of us who claim not to be straight. As long as we're straight, or as long as we appear to be straight, they usually don't have any reason to interrogate us as to whether we're sure, as to whether we have a disorder on top of that. I mean, I would say that most people, even who have any kind of sexual or emotional disorders that interfere with their relationships, are probably straight people. And, no one asks them, well, are you sure you ought to be identifying as straight because maybe that's complicating your issues? They just don't tend to think that a straight orientation could be implicated in any of the journeys and any of the questions that these people are taking. They always assume that that's not relevant, but when we talk about it, it's the first thing they ask us is whether haven't we considered that maybe it's a problem, maybe you should always consider that first, and that it's irresponsible of educators like me to not have that front and center, to not have that as a disclaimer on the front of every piece of media that I produce. I resent that, honestly, that people feel like the responsible way to address something that should, based on the numbers, be affecting 1 out of every 100 people, that I should be obligated to tell people, and it might not actually be this, you might not really be asexual, even though it's very likely that if you're feeling this way and you don't relate to this and you've had this problem, maybe it's really that you're asexual, not that you're broken. Maybe you should just make sure that you're not broken first, address that first, get a bunch of therapy, and it also causes problems for people who do live with disorders and complicating factors, and people who are developmentally disabled. Just people will see those things first, and they'll always assume that they're part of what's causing a person to identify as asexual as a means for delegitimizing it. And that last bit is the important part, because for a lot of us, our sexual orientation is part of the holistic understanding of who we are. It's okay if, say, you're an autistic person who feels that your asexuality and your autism are linked somehow. It's like, okay, you can understand those things as intertwined. You've never been just one of those things and the other one developed later. I mean, I guess except for understanding that most people don't have a sexual orientation that's really well cemented until sometime around puberty. But, as for me, like, a good comparison would be that I'm a woman, and I can't decouple being a woman from being asexual. I'll always be both of those things. And sometimes when I'm experiencing harassment for being asexual, it's always going to be braided in with misogyny, because there are a lot of people out there who, if they're criticizing asexuality, part of that is informed by their belief that women should be available for sex, and that if I'm not serving my purpose, that I don't know my place, that I'm supposed to grinningly open myself to the will of a male partner, and that's what I'm for, and that it's offensive that I'm not interested in doing that, or that I'm a selfish person, or that I'm not going to be fulfilled because I'm not in a marriage, or I don't have children. And these are all things that are very gendered, and for me they're part of my asexual experience, but they're also part of my female experience, and I can't pull those things apart and say this one exclusively belongs to the asexual part of myself and this exclusively belongs to the female part of myself. It's always kind of both, and those two things have also evolved concurrently in my personality. So I can certainly understand that with a lifelong chronic condition, or a lifelong disorder, a lifelong variation, any of these things, like, we're not just a person with this variation kind of tacked on, like, it's part of who we are. And for a lot of people who have something that is well known to be an illness or a disorder, they're not denying that it's an illness or a disorder, but they're also asexual, it's still legitimate to understand those two things as linked in that person's case without necessarily saying asexuality is a disorder or it's part of your disorder and delegitimizing it. So I don't understand quite what this person was trying to get out of us. Like, it seemed like he just wanted an acknowledgement that it isn't normal, and that he thought I was being irresponsible by not leading with that, or that it was irresponsible of me to suggest that people could still be, quote, healthy and asexual. He seemed very fixated, at least on the first comment, with being normal or being normative, and just seemed overly concerned with there being kind of one stripe of normal, that it was my responsibility to declare asexuality out of the norm and, I don't know, make excuses for it, or I don't know. When people like this have a problem with it, sometimes they have a really hard time explaining why, and the real issue behind it a lot of times is just personal prejudices that they realize if they try to find words for them, they sound really bad. So they pretend that it's a different problem. They try to rationalize a different problem that sounds smarter or sounds less bigoted. I don't want to fall into a trap of doing what he said, like reading into his comments and assuming that he believes a bunch of other stuff that he didn't say. But at the same time, you can see where they're coming from. If they really don't have a strong position on like what their actual problem with it is, you just know that they have a problem with it. And especially if you do what I did and what a bunch of the other commenters did, where we knocked away all of the supports of his argument, and then he still made the argument, and then acted like we hadn't countered them with legitimate counters. You know that all along that argument was not that argument. You know that it was based on something else that he's not telling us what it is, because otherwise, if it really was those things, it wouldn't still be standing. He wouldn't be still repeating it as if he still has the same problem. And you see a lot of that in awareness activism, people who don't want to admit that they're phobic or bigoted or just personally uncomfortable or just ignorant about a subject, but they just know they had a knee-jerk negative reaction to it, and they feel like there's got to be some way to argue with it. Of course, that is exacerbated by people who kind of have know-it-all syndrome, people who, like this guy, have spent a lot of their life just feeling like they've already learned the basics of what exists in the world. These are the people who mention biology a lot. They're people who take their junior high school understanding of what male and female is, or what biology is, and try to use it to counter transgender education or asexuality. I mean, and you see how he fell right back on the whole, but it's biology, but this is the center of life, and this is the primary driving force of life as a definition. And I'm like, well, for 1 in 100 of us, it is not, and we're still alive, we're still here, we're still legitimate people. You know, I mean, you have to acknowledge that we're not dead or not, failing to live as human beings if this is not one of our drives. I mean, the only way you can argue against us is if you're claiming we're lying about it, or again, that it's a disorder, that it's, you're trying to say you're not calling us diseased. But I mean, that's essentially what you're doing if you just want us to admit that it's maladaptive or something. With these kinds of people, I also wonder, like, what is a good outcome? What did he want me to do or say? If he's saying these kinds of things to me, and I'm supposed to respond in a positive way, what would winning that argument have sounded like to him? Like, was I supposed to come back and say, you're right, I was really irresponsible, not acknowledging up front that asexuality is really weird? I mean, then is it over? Sometimes I don't know what these people want, and I remain convinced that in some of their cases, it's just about them wanting to speak out against it, or them wanting us not to feel secure. It sounds really nasty, but there are a lot of people out there who they just don't like positivity. They don't like people to feel good about themselves. And I mean, that sounds almost like a caricature villain, but you see it all the time, especially in YouTube comments. Say, in fat activism or body positivity in general, if somebody is in general a you go girl kind of person, but then they see a body size inclusive leggings ad, for instance, one of the ones that I've been seeing a lot of on Facebook and stuff, there's always one or two comments from people who are just like, okay, body positivity, I mean, it's good to feel good about yourself, but there has to be a limit, or she doesn't look good in that, and stop trying to glorify obesity and all this stuff. And it's like, well, ultimately you just kind of want, when you're saying things like that, you want those people not to feel good. You don't want them to feel good about themselves or have moments that they're enjoying, or even like I'm specifically talking about a leggings ad I saw. Like, leggings are active wear, and if people supposedly want overweight people to lose weight and supposedly be healthy, like, shouldn't you kind of support activewear and be supportive of people having something comfortable to have an active lifestyle in? I mean, obviously for me, I'm just thinking, you should be allowed to wear pants and they look really cute. So I don't care what size you are. I mean, I'm not even going to say, like, as long as you're exercising or as long as you're healthy, because I don't care. I don't get to decide as long as. There are lots of people in the world who don't have a choice about being healthy, that they're always going to be sick or they have some kind of chronic condition, and I don't think lesser of them. So, but you do see a lot of people, especially in stuff like fat activism, where the focus seems to be on shame. They don't want people who look like that to feel good about their bodies, because I guess they think it's unacceptable for them to stay fat, and that's their personal choice. They're allowed to do whatever they want with their bodies. And of course there's also the fact that a lot of people who are even very heavy, some of them are a lot healthier than other people that look skinny or look healthy but are not. So, I mean, you can't even judge by the size of the person, but obviously I'm digressing now, but that's a very similar situation to people who are not straight, like those of us who want to be proud of it or at least not be ashamed of it. You see a lot of, who cares? Why do you have to trumpet about this? What do you need to be proud of? Why do you need a pride parade? Like, there's a lot of, why do you think you have the right to feel good about this? You're putting it in my face, you're shoving it in my face, and I'm now going to counter by trying to make you feel bad about it. So there's a certain amount of nastiness behind people who just want to say something negative, and I'm not 100% sure what the motivation is on that. I think in a lot of cases, say with fat activism, it might be coming from people who have a lot of pride in their health levels, or maybe they're fitness buffs, or maybe they're just assholes. They feel like seeing a fat person get praised for just looking good in leggings or something, they might feel like, well, I worked really hard on my body, so I resent that somebody else who I perceive didn't work as hard on their body can also be praised. It's just really gross, because, I mean, you don't know what that person has done at all. You don't know their history and any of that. And with asexuality, or anybody who has a non-straight orientation, or anybody who has a gender identity who's outside of the norm, you will see a lot of people who don't want us to be proud of it at all. They really just, they want us to be quiet about it. And if we say, hey, this needs education, this needs people to talk about it more, because there are people out there who don't know about it, and therefore either they themselves or people who are close to them are feeling pressured to pursue relationships or life choices that do not fit who they are, because they feel like they have to, because they've been programmed by society to think that this is the only path to fulfillment, or they're going to be sad if they don't make a connection that makes them feel very confused and upset if they actually do try to do it the way that they've been told they're supposed to. So what ends up happening is, if you don't have something that's countering those misleading, narrow perspectives, then you have a lot of confused, isolated people who don't know how to help themselves. They don't have coping strategies, they don't have resources, they don't have camaraderie, they don't have community. And basically, if you think those things aren't important and you don't see the need for them, you've probably just had them as part of your life for so long that you just take them for granted. And that is really sad. So the idea that there are people out there who just want that to be taken away from minority voices, it's really ignorant, and that's the nicest word that I can use to describe it. So every time you see somebody in a YouTube comment saying, why is this warrant discussion? Why is this important? It's because there are people like this Huffington Post commenter who, he doesn't even have a real good case for why he wants us to stop talking about it like it's okay and normal, but he sure as heck wants us to stop saying it's normal and that it's okay. So, I make videos so someone will be out there saying something else. And there's nothing abnormal about that. With that, I will bring this rambly video to a close, and I hope that everybody's doing well out there in YouTube land, and I'll see y'all next time.